Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching live and on demand today's webinar by Versalytics, where we're going to go over the analytics pillars of success. First, we have a couple housekeeping items. At the end or toward the end of the webinar, we're going to have a live Q&A. So if you're able to watch live, feel free just to post questions throughout the webinar as you get those questions, and we will get to those at the very end during Q&A. If you have any technical issues as well, please just post those in the LinkedIn comments as well, and we'll try to take care of you as we go along here. So the problem that we're facing today in the analytics industry is a lot of times that laggard companies are not transforming fast enough. And this transformation has been exaggerated due to digital transformation initiatives. We've all heard about it. We've been a part of it. And those digital transformation initiatives actually create a lot of new data sets. And this investment over digital transformation is happening over the next few years. So a lot of organizations are going to be able to create new strategies, new capabilities, and to be able to outmaneuver their competitors. But we're also seeing that failing organizations, they really don't have, sometimes it's hard to find the right people. It's hard to train on the skills to be successful. And then third reason for organizations that are failing is that they struggle to integrate all this brand new data into what become and providing new insights that actually lead eventually to business incomes or speed and efficiency gains. So part of that solution is us here at Versalytics, where if you've never heard of us, we're a consulting company. We're also a analytics talent acquisition. We help recruit and find great talent for you. And then we're also building out a suite of what we call analytics solutions as a service that we could rapidly deploy and bring new and exciting capabilities to your organization in seconds. And so the reason why we're having this webinar today is we're actually going to distill about 20 years of experience from the leaders of Versalytics, and we're going to talk about something that we call the pillars of success, right? And so, and these pillars are even more crucial today due to hyper competition, the growing data volumes and variety of data. And then we're also seeing a massive influx of migration of data from on-premise solutions to cloud solutions. So in many aspects, some of the things that we're going to go over today, it's a little easier to do today than what it was 20 years ago. And then I would now, as host, I'm also CEO of Versalytics. And I've spent a long time, over 20 years in the analytics industry, and had carved out a niche of going in and helping to transform organizations and providing incredible business value. I also spent 5 or 6 years at Tableau. You may have heard of Tableau, a great company where I led the go-to-market strategy and was the director of the retail and consumer goods industry vertical. Now I'm going to hand it off to our CTO at Versalytics, Papa.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. I'm Papa Jao, and I just recently joined Versalytics in October as their CTO, and I am very excited to be part of the team and very much looking forward to helping organizations in their analytics journey. A little bit about me: I've been in the analytics space for the last 20 years. My most recent role was a global head of data science at Bank of America, where I led a team of data scientists to help the bank with their liquidity and treasury business. My background runs the gamut from software engineering, data science, and I'm looking forward to putting those skills to use to help our client. Now, I'm going to introduce our Chief Visual Officer, Bridget.
Thank you, Papa. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm Bridget Cogley, Chief Visualization Officer and co-founder of Versalytics. Before I worked here, I've worked as a consultant for about 7 years, and I've had a career about 13 years in analytics. Before doing that, I was actually an American Sign Language interpreter, and that's what really informs a lot of my takes on visual analysis. It's also part of how I've gotten into becoming a Tableau Visionary Hall of Fame. I'm also the co-author of Functional Aesthetics for Data Visualization. So definitely very, very passionate about the visualization side of things. Jeff, back to you.
All right, thank you, Bridget. Papa, what he didn't tell you was he was a professional soccer player, or at least he thinks he's professional. And Bridget is actually a ninja. So if you see her at a conference, you don't want to cross her. You know, she will hit you with a pair of nunchucks. So the reason why we're here today, right? So sorry for the marketing and sales slides, introductions, but the problem is real and it's a big problem. Over the last 20 years, we've come to, at leading large scale enterprises and interfacing with some of the top analytics talent around the world and leaders. We've developed something that we call the pillars of success. And these are items that we think really matter. And as we present each one of these pillars, it's going to be as we present each one of these pillars, sometimes you'll see overlap, right? Sometimes you'll see overlap from trust to adoption culture, maybe speed and context, right? Or speed and accessibility and interactivity. But in our experience, organizations that are doing really well from an analytics perspective, they have an active plan around each one of these items. And even if an organization is doing all of these items really well, but they're missing the mark on one of these, it can actually have a detrimental impact on the overall analytics excellence of the organization, which means maybe you're not being as competitive in the marketplace. Maybe you're not getting the amount of business value that you would expect, or maybe you're not getting the amount of speed and efficiency gains that you can actually see from analytics. So with that, let's jump into the first one. And I do just want to warn everybody, each one of these could probably be a whole webinar series. So we're going to go over at high level. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to post those in the comments, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper as we go.
Yeah, trust, right? Such an umbrella term. It can go many directions. What we think were the key things to analytics success was to focus on things like partnership, right? Securing a good partnership with the business partner is key, and that's part of enrolling the right leaders for your project. That leader can help unblock situation with the business. There are many issues that crop up during the life of an analytic project, and having a trusted partnership with the business is key to getting those issues out of the way. Another thing that I see crop up too is collaboration. It's very important that the project not be a one-man show. For instance, the business analyst in the project is equally as important as the principal data scientist in the project, right? Making sure that everyone feels that they have skin in the game in a collaborative environment will only help make the project more successful. In my experience, when everybody feels that they have a voice in the project, those projects turn out to be more successful than not. And another thing too, when a project is successful, it's very important to recognize the different actors, making sure that the key people, right? I always go back to the business analysts. Those guys are important. The product managers, right? People without the big title, they need to be acknowledged and they need to be given a victory lap when the project is successful. Doing that, in my experience, has paid dividends. And yeah, I couldn't emphasize that enough. That's those three things are key to success: partnership, collaborative, and shared success.
All right, Papa. Yeah, so as you were talking, I was thinking of the old thing, the old saying, a rising tide raises all ships, right? And so make sure you're bringing those partners along with you. When I think of trust too, I think about data, right? And trusting the data. Is it consistent? Is it secured, right? Do we know that the data is not being changed? And we've seen the world in analytics change dramatically from 10, 15 years ago, where a lot of data was in spreadsheets. Now we're seeing tools where I can actually go in and change data in databases and all kinds of different applications. But having that unified trust of data centralized, be able to have definitions, clear definitions around that leads to trust. And then obviously securing the data. And, our friends in Europe have been, I think, way ahead of the curve around trusting and trusting, customer data. I think the United States will catch up eventually, but we're way behind. And be able to have the trust of our customers or our business partners, and knowing that we're actually doing the right thing with their data and information, that's part of that trust circle as well.
And I want to play off that a little bit with just, again, how we communicate with people. I go back to my training as an interpreter, and trust was earned. We didn't just get trust by the very nature of our work. We had to earn that. We had to really be clear about our relationships to the data. We had to be clear about, our ethics of the situation and transparently communicate what we were trying to do. And so to me, when you kind of take all of this together, all of this is so that you earn trust and that you're able to effectively communicate and kind of share with people, so that when they look at whatever you create, whether it's, pulling in the data, whether it's visualizing the data, whether it's accessing the data to make a decision, all of it really goes down to earning the trust. So Jeff, I want to turn that back over to you to talk a little bit about speed.
Yeah. So I think of speed in kind of three different buckets, if you will, for better or for worse. Build, query, and adopt. And I think there's a phenomenon within analytics just called analytics momentum. And I think it's really important for organizations, even if they're not doing this today, of aligning the product, the project management styles, right? We've seen a lot of change in the analytics space, going from traditional IT waterfall versus more agile. And I actually think that adopting kind of an agile approach, or that's one of the key benefits of a data visualization tool like Tableau or Power BI or some of the other tools in the marketplace. Because it's a little bit different. When you're able to sit there, let's say, if you're an IT-centric organization and you're able to build, let's say, with key business users. And, sometimes business users are only going to ask for what they know and what they think that you can actually build. And if you're able to do that interactively in collaboration with them, they're going to feel like more part of the process, is what Papa was talking about. But then I also think that it winds up building a better product. So that kind of build speed really, really matters. Sometimes when we talk about speed, we talk about real time. And I think real time really matters within the context of how quick can you actually use the data? How fast can you interact with it? And how quickly can you use the insight? And then also the query speed matters too, because if I have a curiosity about how sales are going in a certain organization, let's say, and every time that I interact with a dashboard or some sort of report, if it takes 30 to 40, 60 seconds, you're going to lose me, right? And as humans, our average attention span is 8 seconds right now. And if we think about, and I'm sure we've all done it, whenever we actually go and do a Google search, if we don't get results instantly, what do? We hit F5 on the browser, we hit refresh, we think we have an internet issue. And analytics is heading that way, where we have to be able to quickly interact with the data that we're looking at. Okay, Papa?
Yeah, I mean, when I hear speed too, right, I can go in many ways. One of them being, right, how do we get quick feedback, right? Many ways. What I've found useful is try the proof of concept route. Innovate fast, fail fast. We all heard that, right? Or a variation of that, right? That allows us to know what works in our environment, what our processes can allow, right? What our culture, the company culture will support, right? So it's very, very, very important that we have an environment that facilitates quick proof of concept, right? That has paid dividend for me time and time and time again. And on top of that too, right, as you build proof of concept, you can start getting a sense of how to plan for every layer of the analytic project, right? You'll know that you need to spend extra time on the network. You'll know that you need to spend extra time on the bandwidth, planning out, like Jeff was saying, right? What is the SLA for the queries, right? Is 8 seconds satisfactory for the current environment, or should we go to sub 5 seconds? All of those, right, pertain to speed, and having some quick proof of concept will allow for us to plan that.
And I'll say that the speed was really critical to my success. Just early on, being able to quickly get into Tableau and answer questions and find insights that historically were extremely hard to answer. And, I know for me personally, the move from Excel to Tableau, where I was able to go in and not just, quickly see the data, but I wasn't having to build out numerous calculations to answer what was really a simple question. And then being able to visually see and communicate that and let others also have that same efficiency so that they look at it, they also quickly gain meaning. So for me, that kind of speed and ability to rapidly deploy was essential, particularly working for a startup. We needed answers quickly, and that was all very helpful. And I leveraged certain paradigms. I mean, there's agile, which helps you move quickly. There's also design thinking. So as you think about, I want to, build something, design thinking really allows you that efficiency as well. So that's kind of been my take with speed. I want to jump into the other part of this that intersects to me very directly with speed, and that is the idea of accessibility and interactivity. And so there's a lot of different definitions of accessibility. And I want to dig into that a little bit. There's the accessibility of I want to make sure users with disabilities can access it. There's also typically we use it for ubiquity. So being able to broadly send this out and have a lot of people accessing this. I care about both. And so you'll see that when I design these visualizations, this is one example. I'm thinking through how do people use this information? How do they ask, that first question, call it the money shot question, to get that rapid yes or no answer, and then start delving further into those questions. Historically, back to speed, that was really hard. Now, as we gain these efficiencies, it's really easy to unfurl these answers and let our own users have their own analytical conversation, which to me is the magic. It really lets people begin to understand. And so as we design these with ideas like cohesion in mind, it makes it much easier for our end users to jump in and have a similar conversation to what we have. Usually when we're having a conversation with the data, we ask it a lot of questions, we go on this whole journey. So that way, when we present it to somebody else to have the conversation, we do so in a way that's easy for them to pick up where we left off.
And Bridget, I think an area I'm really passionate about is the interactivity. And I think it's an area that people kind of fail to kind of fully appreciate sometimes. And it has such a huge, profound impact because the interactivity actually encourages curiosity. And too many times, if we're kind of creatures of habit, right? If we have static reports, PDFs, what happens is we get those answers, but then we always have new questions. And now that is a whole new kind of analytics path. And I think you can deliver both in the same kind of medium. And then I also think that the device really, really matters to help enhance that interactivity. And I really encourage people that are in the analytics space to know all of their different internal customers or potentially even external customers, right? And to know how they're using the information and actually go and, spend days or a week with them. Because then you start to see an example is a warehouse worker, at a massive retailer. They've got over 1 million, when you have some of these warehouses that are so huge, every answer or every question that you have, they can't just go and walk to their central desktop computer in the middle of the warehouse. And if they're out and about, they're able to interact with their people and their team, but they also have the answers right there at their fingertips. That really matters. And so being able to bring those answers and questions to the floor really empowers people. And sometimes the medium that we leverage can actually hurt people, and then we're not maximizing our input. So every question that a business may have can't turn into an IT project. I think gone are the days where the IT projects that were taking 6 to 9 months to answer a question. And we had a former one company that I knew, that process was 3 years. And to go back to our first problem slide, that company is no longer in business. And so this is kind of real. So Papa, handing off to you to.
Yeah, just a word of caution when we are talking about interactivity and accessibility. It cannot just be a kitchen sink, right? There has to be a balance, right? Or the users will struggle to find the right information. And in my experience, as you put it, Jeff, embedding yourself in the shoes of the end user, right, may be a good way to strike a balance. Another way that I've found very useful is to leverage a SME from the business, right, or a product manager. They can, most of the times, they are very good at guiding you on, where to draw the line. So just want to make sure we just don't go overboard in the, yeah. So context. So context is very key, right? One has to make sure that we are solving the right problem. And how do you do that, right? It's very important to know which question to ask, and also making sure that the answers that one is getting is appropriate. Again, leveraging a good product manager usually help with that, right? And also educating yourself in the process. And just to borrow again from what Jeff just said, embed yourself in the business to make sure you gain a decent understanding of the business before coming up with a solution. In my experience, what I found interesting is that usually the technical aspect, meaning the algorithm that one leverage to solve a problem, is really not the hard part, but the hard part is to really translate the question into 5, 10 additional questions, right? To derive more from the business. And leverage SME. This also, I mean, context ties into also building leadership that and partnership, right? Leverage the help of the top partners that you have in the business to just make sure you nail down the context. Bridget?
And I'll jump in and just say that, our communication is context dependent. So when we talk to one another, depending on where we are, that speech changes drastically. And so that context really informs how we communicate. When we make business dashboards, we design them in a very specific way than we do our own fun personal dashboards. And so when we think about communicating to our audiences, that's everything from jargon. We can use jargon to say, hey, I'm one of you, but we can also use jargon to say, hey, you know what? You're not part of this conversation. And so that's one of the big ways that we invite our users either in or out. And it directly intersects with data literacy, because what we're doing is we're not just teaching individual skills when we provide the context, we're also kind of team building. And so, we're supporting that culture, and we're saying that, you're welcome in or you're welcome out. And particularly with culture or with context, it's really key that this has to be strategic. We've got to really make sure that we're moving people and keeping people going along.
Yeah, so I think when I'm thinking of context, I also think about the right information in the hands of the right people at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke on the last slide a little bit about the form factor and that, but it also, I think us as analytics practitioners overall need to do a little better job of adding automated context. And I think we'll see this through, I think the promise maybe of some robotic process automation and some decisioning systems like that. Because if we think about it, if we were walking into a joint sales meeting with one of our largest customers, we would want to know all these key metrics of usability and sentiment. And I think the analytic systems of the near future will actually be able to know some of that. And I won't have to go look for it, and it will just come to me. I also think that we're kind of living in exciting times where we're starting to see some advances with compute. I think we're going to start seeing AR glasses. All the talk about the metaverse. Actually, I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting ways for us to learn and interact with data and information. through those mediums, right? I think we're going to see an emerging of the physical world, and we're already starting to see that with computer vision and audio and text and IoT, and be able to know holistically what's going on inside and outside, let's say a restaurant, and be able to do things that we just couldn't do 5 to 6 years ago. So I think we're in a fascinating time. I also think that some of the context, needs to be role based, right? What do I need at this instant to make a better decision? Like if we think about a grocery store manager, and if he or she is in the aisle and they're looking at inventory and they see stockouts, what information do they need at that instant? And it can't be an experience where they go into a back room, it takes 15 minutes to log in, they drop down to the 15th, 16th report. And as I'm talking through this, if it sounds crazy, I know that you, the audience, you have a smile on your face because you've seen the same type of thing. Yeah. And if we think about if they have AR glasses on, they're able to look, they see the SKU, and they know that, hey, those items are being shipped and they're going to arrive tonight. And I think that's the world that we're rapidly heading to. So let's moving on to, just for time, to adoption culture and data literacy.
Adoption. I'll touch on a bit on adoption here. How many times has we seen companies work on a project for 4 months and have the business not be interested in it, right? Usually that's because adoption wasn't at the forefront when the project was being worked on. And believe it or not, it's one of the hardest thing in analytics because change is hard, right? People, they are comfortable with what they know. So bringing in a new product in analytics is very hard to get adopted, right? And I found that people just don't devote enough time to ensure that it becomes a success. Many things get in the way of adoption. Culture, the company is not amenable to changing, right? How do you tackle that? Someone need to spend time thinking about how to work within the same culture, right? The processes in place today in a given company, do they support the new change, right? That's part of adoption, thinking about it ahead of time. That's thinking about adoption. Good design of the product too will help in adoption, right? People, they need to be familiar with how the product will work. How do you essentially take care of change management before the product goes live, right? So defining a clear roadmap of adoption is crucial with the support of the right business champion, right? And as you guys can hear, all of these pillars, they are all interconnected, right? We cannot separate them, and that's why as you engage in a analytics project, make sure you take care of all the pillars that we are discussing today. So I think if one devotes enough time in adoption with the support of a good partner in the business, that will ensure that the analytics project could become a success.
And I'll chime in there with what I often hear when I'm working with practitioners is, data literacy, that is a huge barrier to adoption. That, our users are struggling with the charts. They can't navigate what we've put out there. And I want to push back a little bit on the individualized skill and focus on the broader sociological skill. So when we think about what happens when we learn to read as a culture, we start taking information in that way as a primary means. And so when you think about what comes before literacy, it's orality. And I argue that a lot of organizations are still at the data orality stage. They are still verbally reciting numbers. They're still conversing about it directly. And it is a learned skill to begin to take information from charts and graphs and to sense these patterns and to truly make sense of them. And so that's a much bigger movement than just simply teaching, here's a bar chart, here's this chart, here's how you read it, but also how you take information from charts and graphics as a primary source. And so training can help that. But what often happens is that when you start getting into a financial crunch, the first thing cut is training dollars. You start trimming into it. And if you've taken Six Sigma, you also know that training has its limits. And that's where you have to work with the culture. And it has to come from the top. When you want to move people, you really need to shape a culture that embraces data literacy, that embraces the adoption, but also comes from the top and helps people move.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to culture, I think it's okay to be data informed. As you can tell behind me, I'm a huge sports fan, and I always laugh when I'm watching a football game, and and the announcers are talking about the analytics, and this coach made this decision right here, and it just went completely against the flow of the game, and they failed. And I often think that, if they were using their gut instinct, their coaching instinct, and they were data informed, they would have had a better outcome. And I think we see that all the time. And I think that we need to be okay with kind of the reconciliation of our beliefs and what we've learned, and then also, not use that to look at the data inside and kind of change the meaning of that. And I think and I think that leadership actually isn't just a top-down approach, right, from the executives down to the front lines. I think it goes from the front lines of an organization back up to the executives. And we've talked about some easy thing or some things that we've talked about have been really easy, and Papa talked about adoption, and that and change management is, I think, the hardest part of analytics as well. But I think the culture is hard too, particularly when times get tough. Because when times get tough, we have a tendency to pull back and just do what we used to do. And I think organizations really have to be a little bit better, and be okay with testing and learning. Okay. Trying something, seeing how it performs, then course correcting. And sometimes we get too focused on one certain thing, and we just don't learn from that. So that's got to be part of the data culture as well.
Embedded advanced analytics. Analytics projects, they just don't stand alone, right? When we engage in a project analytics, it is to improve a process, increase revenue, reduce waste, the gamut. It runs the gamut, right? But what one has to consider too is how do you embed that in the existing process? Like, for instance, if in retail, if you have a fraud detection tool that cannot stand alone by itself, right? Ahead of time, before the project goes live, one has to think about how to integrate that algorithm, that analytics project, into the POS, right? Into point of sale system. Or if one is in banking, when dealing with liquidity and abnormalities, right? How do you integrate the algorithm into the workflow, the daily workflow of the sales specialist? Enough time, enough thought needs to be given to how the processes work together with the new project. Otherwise, people will struggle to use it and will resist, right? Once again, change is hard. So thinking ahead of time about the business processes and how to embed the new tool into business processes is key to being successful.
And to me, it really boils down to placing it where people are. And so I've done a lot of communicating data science projects where I've taken a lot of these advanced algorithms and worked between both the data scientists, but also people with the ground truth. I can't go to a doctor and say, well, my algorithm predicts that this patient is most likely to readmit, because if I start pushing too hard against somebody else's professional expertise, and again, particularly doctors and other professionals, they're going to go, well, that's not what my algorithm says. And so part of the communication of this is helping them see, here's all the data set. This is why this algorithm thinks so. That way they can reconcile, here's the predictive algorithm against their ground truth. And what I've seen when you do that, and you do that well, and you do that right, is a lot of movement. And then the beauty is you can also then further provide feedback. Well, your algorithm predicted this. I went ahead and did this behavior. It didn't wholly pan out. And this is why I suspect so. Can we add in this other data point? Can we look at this? Can we evaluate these other things? And you actually see through these conversations that the embedded analytics get much better. And then two, you also see better adoption. So you see how that also feeds back in to the system and to the other pillars.
Yeah, the data science output, right, has to be leveraged by those that are making decisions and that can execute. Had a lunch with a great team of data scientists, about 20 of them sitting around the table. And they were doing a lot of really incredible math and algorithms and just really creative in what they were doing. But then I asked, like, okay, well, how's that being utilized by people that can actually make decisions? And they all kind of looked around the table at each other. And to me, it can't just be really cool math and be done in a vacuum, right? And those outputs, it's okay if it's not just a data visualization, although that's a great way to kind of learn and see. But maybe that output, it gets loaded into other applications, whether it's a manufacturing application, a supply chain, or marketing attribution system, or labor allocation. And so because when you do that, you're fully making um, advantage of the talent and the capability of the data science team. Making those key decisions seems to drive a lot of not just business value, but also efficiency. And a lot of times it winds up creating a better, even customer experience for a lot of people. So we've talked about a lot of concepts today. And if we're thinking about data culture, we're thinking about culture or speed or trust in data. If you're doing all those right, and I'll use another sports analogy. Let's say you're batting 1,000, which means you get 100 attempts, 600 attempts, and you get 600 hits. Okay, which that never happens in baseball, so maybe it's a bad analogy. But if you are doing everything right and you've got analytics excellence, but if people are not taking action on the information, if they're not changing, if they are not driving efficiency gains, it's kind of all for naught. So as you're going and you think about your organization and how you're, and kind of do a self-assessment, how are you guys doing in each one of those pillars of success? And then think, if you're doing those well, what actions are you doing? And I think that in the future, I think there will be systems that will help measure what the action is that's taking, and then help kind of close the feedback loop. And that's kind of like probably the Pillars of Success 2.0 webinar that we'll do in a couple years, about kind of closing that feedback loop and action loop, and then measuring the impact there. But make sure that everything is kind of anchored to some sort of action or decision mechanism. So now we're at the QA side. So I appreciate your patience. If there's any questions, please type those into the LinkedIn in the comments section below, and we're more than happy to answer some of those questions. We've had a few questions sent directly to us. And so, and we'd love to know, what do you think we missed? What needs to be added? And we'd love to hear too, what's your biggest takeaway? There was a lot of experience on a couple of those slides, and some of the slides, when you start first looking at them, I think it's a very simplistic slide, but there's a lot of depth and grains that go into each one of those pillars. So would love to know what your biggest takeaway is. So
I've got one question coming in pretty hot. What advice would you give if an organization doesn't want to change?
I'll take this, and I'm going to make Papa laugh. If the organization doesn't want to change, sometimes you have to change organizations, which is sometimes easier said than done. And we've talked about, the change management aspect, but I think insight, I'm a big believer in analytics momentum. And sometimes the best way to get that analytics momentum is to partner with somebody, a leader, an influential leader, a team or department, maybe one that's struggling or they're hurting, maybe their revenue's down, maybe they're not doing quite as good as they used to, somebody that needs help. And I think if you take that approach and then you help them achieve better success, then that tends to then start to get out in the organization really, really quickly. And then sometimes you can have the answers, you can do everything, and then sometimes organizations don't want to change, and that's okay, right? But I think that's why we also see analytics talent sometimes move around to different organizations, just because sometimes, if you've got really good people that are passionate about analytics, and they want to enable change. So us as leaders, we sometimes got to make sure that we take all the barriers and knock all the barriers down to enable those teams to be successful.
Papa, did you have a couple
Anything-
thoughts?
Yeah,
Papa, you want to add to that? I saw you smile. I knew I was going to smile out of you there.
yeah. I think just to add a little bit to that, right? What I also found useful in instances like that is to try to have a side project, right, and build on that. And as you work on the side project, try to enlist the help of a business partner, right? It's it can be very successful to move a company into the right direction if the project is compelling enough. So maybe not give up on day one, right? But at least knock at all the doors before you walk away. That would be my advice. Yeah.
I feel like some of these suggestions really kind of take a page out of Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. I really love that book, and it's probably one of my number one recommendations in just the business world. It's a book that I bought a long time ago, and I used to great effect to figure out how to make change because it really broke down for me. Is this a logical problem? Do I need to direct the writer? Is it, do I need to appeal to somebody's logic? Or do I need to motivate the elephant? And what I found is a lot of these problems end up being a motivate the elephant problem. And for me, it's like, okay, I need to, get some rage going and send people running. The third part of that book covers how to shape the path. And what I hear in some of these answers is that path shaping. I'm going to shape the path and make it easier for you. Where I tend to play is I'll shape the path first, and then I'll peel, I'll let the writer fail multiple times. And then I get a really sharp pin and I go behind and I really motivate that elephant. And I have found that 9 times out of 10, it works. I've yet to be fired for it.
So another question we had come through here is one or some of these pillars more important than others? Bridget, I'll propose that to you first.
So I think there's definitely a balance in all of these. I mean, I worry if you try to triage one or you say, okay, I'm going to get this one down really, really well, you're still going to struggle. And so I definitely think that to me, and I'm willing to be wrong on this, that the reason we kind of have this whole wheel is that if you have it in balance, it rolls really smoothly. If you have none of them, you don't have a wheel and you're rolling on kind of, the axle. But if you have them nicely filled out, you've got a nice solid wheel in which to gain kind of that momentum towards success. Papa, any other thoughts?
No, I think that's in line with what I was thinking, right? We have another comment from Colin Kerr.
Yeah. Look at this fancy. See, Colin, thank you for the question. And see, when you answer a question in chat, we get to throw your image up here for people around the world to see. So some of Papa's comments sound like there needs to be a convergence of analytics with software application development discipline. Even though there are great analytics tools, should analytics teams adopt more of an application development mindset for sustainable solutions?
I can go first on that. Yeah, I do agree with that, right? And that will allow for agility, right? Trying and failing fast. That goes back to the idea of trying and failing fast, innovation, speed, right? If the analytics team don't have the mindset of a application development shop, right? Everything will turn out to be a project, right? Every idea that they want to try would turn out to be a project. So yeah, Colin, I think your suggestion is spot on there. Anything
I'll
else?
take that and tweak it a little bit. I mean, for what I do with the visualization side, I actually tend to lean more on design thinking. And design thinking ends up in that innovation bucket. And I really like it because you focus on, let me make the smallest prototype I can. Let me fail as quickly as I can. Let me learn all the things that we don't want and do these learning launches and do all of these things quickly so that when I finally deploy this to a scale, I know it's going to work. And that's one of the reasons why I like design thinking as one of those methodologies.
Yeah, and I think to also to Colin's comment, I think that's why you've seen in the analytics space a lot of the tool sets, the Tableaus, the Power BIs. They they are starting to adopt kind of the developer mindset as well, knowing that you know um, you know analytics can be embedded inside the applications, and then applications can be embedded inside of the analytics, and they should really be used hand in hand. I know one project that we worked on it a few years ago was there was a problem with orders that were going from a particular retailer and they were sending off to manufacturing facilities in China. And sometimes what they were doing, they had big runs of like small, medium, large, and extra large, and very talented people. Just they're human. They made mistakes, and they would send thousands of orders in for medium, and then two for large, and then extra large. And the way that works sometimes, of instead of just getting confirmation of that order, sometimes when the orders get sent, the cutover costs from those different sizes are so astronomical, particularly just for a onesie or twosie. What happens is that entire order would be canceled. And so when you think about production issues and getting things made and getting things shipped and getting things on the rack, right? And so the way we solved that was we actually had visualization embedded in, which helped to actually um, which helped to validate the order before it was sent. And instead of it happening every couple weeks, every month, that went to zero because people were able to use data visualization as a tool to actually validate the orders before they kind of sent it. And it was a really easy way to see massive amount of orders in different breaks in size, quantity, and pack quantities, and be able to distill that and be like, oh, I didn't mean to do it this way. And sometimes it was just a erroneous keystroke, and they could see it, and then they could actually change the order and submit it on. So I think you're going to see that a lot more, and a lot of the analytics companies, the software companies, I think will continue to kind of make it easier to blend analytics into applications. And actually, I think the nature of cloud-based analytics and cloud-based data makes it really easy, or a lot easier to do that than say 4 to 5 years ago.
And I just want to play on that applications comment a little bit. The more integrated a solution is, the better I find it. I mean, one of my superpowers, even early on, and it seems silly to say it now, but it's like I would build these QA reports. So we would have people doing quality assurance, and I would build these reports where they could quickly and easily click on a link and get right to that record. And just something as simple as that meant that reduced a lot of friction because they didn't have to go to the dashboard, reconcile it, then go find it. And the more you remove those speed bumps and the more you kind of keep people in the environment, the easier it makes it.
Okay. Any additional questions? I don't see any coming through.
Well, speaking of solutions, our next webinar will be in January. We are going to take a little bit of a holiday break. And so our next webinar will actually focus on one of those embedded solutions, and that's the speech solution. I personally am really, really excited about this one. I've got a background in American Sign Language interpreting, and so anything dealing with language just absolutely thrills me. And I personally can't wait for you to see this solution come to life, because what you'll get to see is, kind of the riddle of when we have call centers, how do we make meaning? When we are having conversations, how do we best make meaning? And so, this has been a collaboration amongst everybody on this call and, a few others not on it. And so I'll be really excited to, help share that out to you. The other really exciting webinar that we've got coming up sometime early in 2023 is Cart.com. They've been an absolutely wonderful client. They are innovators in this space. Jeff can tell you, just exactly the momentum that they've had out in the world. And so it's really exciting to bring them on, chat with them, and begin to understand kind of their perspective. And so that's another webinar that we're really excited to share.
Yeah, if you haven't seen, go to Cart.com, educate yourself on Cart. They're one of the fastest growing SaaS applications ever, or companies ever. Really interesting what those guys doing. Great team, and we look forward to bringing, particularly in the embedded analytics space. I think you'll be blown away by what you see in January. And then we also have a series of past events And she hasn't pitched it on this webinar, but I'll do it for her. Bridget has wrote a phenomenal book that she co-wrote with the head of research at Tableau, Functional Aesthetics for Data Visualization. If you haven't picked that up yet, please do. And I am not Bridget's agent. I didn't write it. I don't get one penny from it, but it's a great book. I actually think it's going to be a foundational book that a lot of analytics classes around the world will use to help their analytics students tell better stories with data visualization.
The Geo Institute already has done that, so it's slowly getting out there.
See, yeah. It's always good to be right. And then we had a partner spotlight, and you can see this on our Versalytics company page within LinkedIn, and we'll also put on our website here soon. A great company based out of UK that is making drive time geospatial analysis as easy as a few clicks. And it's really incredible what they've brought in. Highly recommend you go watch that. If you're halfway interested in geospatial analysis, you'll be blown away by what they're doing and the ease of use. And so we were really excited to bring that to our customers.
I'll just chime on with, I continue to be amazed with that solution. I know historically when I've done very similar analyses, the amount of data prep I've had to do what they can do in just a matter of clicks is just, it's a night and day comparison. So I definitely will encourage anybody to check out that webinar. So really, thank you all for joining us today. If you are joining us live, thank you for your questions and comments. If you're watching this video afterwards and you have questions and comments, please don't hesitate to email us, connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to discuss analytics. And so if there's any way that we can help you or answer questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.